Food. Who makes it and what's allowed in it could change under Brexit. We all eat, so why is no one talking about it? Currently, our food and product standards are upheld through EU regulation, which many believe are better and more robust than US regulation. The main difference is through the use of genetically modified or GM foods. The US uses it in over 90% of its crops, while the EU uses virtually none of it. And the EU has banned up to 80 pesticides still available in the US. Brexit means we'll be rewriting those rules, and the US companies want in. Linda Coucher, trade deal campaigner, told us earlier that US agricultural businesses had previously been aggressive in their attempts to get their products into the UK.
We can look at what went on with the trade and investment partnership with the EU that has been negotiated for a few years but is at a standstill now. And we can see there that the biggest force was US agribusiness pushing to get their lower standard food into the EU. And you can see that the UK is as always, quite a GM-friendly government, and that the UK can be the opening for that, for US agribusiness pushing into the UK and as a doorway to the rest of Europe. Liam Fox has already said that the needs of the banking industry and financial services will be prioritised in a US-UK trade agreement if it was to happen. So you can see that the needs of the public and so for instance on food standards will be not prioritised at all. It will be traded off for the needs of banking.
The transatlantic trade and investment partnership deal was beaten back by campaigners and the public, with threats to food standards cited as a central concern. But those deals are now back on the table. And we've already had warnings that corporations and big businesses are already influencing the formation of Brexit negotiations. Some of those companies are food giants, and they're becoming bigger than ever. Over the last few years, 6 big global food companies have merged and become 3 larger corporations. While the UK negotiates new standards, these big companies have huge lobbying power and very deep pockets. When the Brexit vote came through, the US food giant Monsanto sensed a real opportunity to try and enter the UK, according to The Times. Currently, EU laws prevent the development of GM crops. But when we talked to Helena Paul just before the general election, she told us that the current government are open to relaxing their regulation on food and caution.
Although there are some traditional landowners who might be resistant to GM, the main body of the Tory party is definitely not resistant. And George Eustice, the Minister for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, has indicated his willingness, after Brexit, to consider completely relaxing the rules on GM in the UK. And the problem with Brexit is this, that once outside the EU, the UK won't have to abide by EU regulations, because the EU has always enshrined the precautionary principle in its legislation, which is a careful approach to innovation. And the UK government for a long time has been saying that they object to the precautionary principle because it's a barrier to innovation. And so they want to install an innovation principle alongside it or instead of it. And basically the British government, ever since the first GM came along, has been saying what we need is these new technologies. We can get patents, we can make a lot of money, we can be leaders in these technologies.
A source close to Monsanto reportedly told The Times that Brexit could mean there is an emphasis on innovation above caution, and that the review of policy after Brexit is an opportunity. What would a company like Monsanto do to our food industry? In July this year, 100,000 pages of documents revealed some of the deepest and darkest secrets of chemical companies like Monsanto as they were made public. The Poison Papers, as they have now been named, lay out a 40-year history of deceit and collusion involving the chemical industry and the regulatory agencies that were supposed to be protecting human health and environment, said Peter von Stackelberg from the Centre for Media and Democracy in a report for The Intercept. So this means that companies like Dow and Monsanto have been able to infiltrate regulatory bodies in order to influence regulation in their favour. There's been a revolving door between the US government and these companies. Closer to home, there's been a hearing about Monsanto in the EU Parliament, looking into allegations of regulatory interference and manipulation of science and media. The hearing focused on the safety of glyphosate, used in Monsanto's popular Roundup weed killer. Concerns arise from a 2015 report by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which determined that glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, is probably carcinogenic to humans and linked to several forms of cancer. The EU Parliament have taken a powerful stand against Monsanto, but will our UK politicians do the same? A think tank launched by International Trade Minister Liam Fox has already been in discussion on lifting a ban on carcinogenic products, calling them a trade barrier. Meanwhile, Michael Gove told attendees at Farmers Weekly that he would support full access to materials like glyphosate, despite worldwide concerns. And how do you feel about these companies coming to the UK? Is it a price worth paying? And are we being told enough about what's at stake? Let us know your comments.